Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Storm Teammate Meteorologist Ed Bloodsworth. I just wanted to go ahead and pop on with you this morning. It's about 11 o'clock. We're just about to hit the top of the hour, and we just got the latest update on Irma from the National Hurricane Center. We want to pass that along, just sort of talk a little bit about what we're thinking is going to happen with this storm in the coming days. I understand. It was just a week ago we were talking about landfalling Hurricane Harvey, so we tend to think that that's obviously on everyone's minds right now, especially when you were seeing another pretty big hurricane starting to develop out in the Atlantic water. So hopefully this will calm some fears here, and we're just going to tell you what we're thinking here in the forecast center and what we believe is happening. We're going to show you some forecast models and sort of talk about what they're painting out and again what we're talking about. And also we're going to be looking at what's going on locally. We'll take a look at max defender rate and talk about that. All right, so it is now 11 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. If you are just joining us, thank you for logging on here to our Facebook page. We are up to about 800 viewers. All right, so let's go ahead and get right to it, shall we? Let's go ahead and pop on. By the way, just let me know where you're watching from this morning, by the way, on our comments. I can see over here, and I'm going to try to answer some questions over the next maybe about 10 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and talk about Irma. This is the look of the entire tropical Atlantic. And you see the U.S. mainland, state of Florida, Cuba, the island of Hispaniola, and the coast of Africa as well. So we're talking about a storm that is way out in the Atlantic here. So this is tropical, or say Hurricane Irma. And there it is. It was a Category 3 hurricane yesterday. Overnight, the storm actually weakened back down to a Category 2 hurricane. So the winds came down to about 110. Now, looking at the structure of this, it's actually a fairly compact hurricane. It's a very small storm, relatively speaking here. You can still see the clear center of circulation and the eye that's forming. We've been noticing it. It's kind of fighting a couple of things right now. If you notice south of the eye, you're starting to notice some of those greens there just south of the eye, almost that strip of green that starts to wrap into the system. That's some mid-level dry air right now that system is trying to fight off, to try to strengthen. And that's partially why it's sort of fluctuating with its intensity right now. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and show you what is happening in terms of the latest update. So this is the 11 a.m. advisory. It literally just came down from the Hurricane Center, so we're sort of digesting this live here. So we have a movement that's to the west at 15, although reading the discussion, it looks like it's starting to move just south of due west here. We expected it to sort of move southwest, so it's starting to make that turn. The max winds are 110, so it has not changed in the last 6 hours. It is still a strong Category 2 hurricane, winds 110. The pressure did come up to 973, and we noticed that the eye has sort of been appearing and then disappearing again and here and again. It's going through what we call eye wall replacement cycles, where this tends to happen with strong hurricanes, where the eye will form, the winds will increase, then a brand new eye will start to regenerate. So that's what's been happening on and off here for the last about 24 hours or so. So the latest track, here we go. It will tend to move west-southwest over the next about 24 to 48 hours, and then it will start to make a turn more west-northwest. So it starts to make the turn. It's going to round an upper-level ridge that's sitting over the Atlantic, a big upper-level high. It's the Bermuda High. You've heard of it. Well, it is expected to strengthen over that time frame. Now, we're thinking by the middle of the week. Pay attention to the time frame here. When it gets to the islands, north of the islands, that is 8 a.m. Wednesday. So that is still a good, 4 or 5 days away. By 8 a.m. Thursday, it now appears to be north of Puerto Rico, potentially as a Category 4 hurricane. And just keep in mind, when you look at the intensity forecast here, you look at the actual wind speed forecast, that there's a lot up in the air when it terms exactly how strong this is going to be as it starts to get closer towards the Bahamas. So there's still a lot of question marks in regards to that. But this is the official track. So you've got a lot of plans going on this Labor Day. Don't let that impact your Labor Day plans. This is really not going to be a significant factor for the U.S. until we get into the middle of next week. By then, it'll be north of the islands. So let's take a look at those spaghetti models, the forecast models. They are coming into some agreement here, especially over the next 5 days or so, where it generally starts to take it north of the islands. So each one of those lines represents a forecast model. Now, what we've been noticing is that, again, they're starting to come into some very good agreement, especially as we start getting towards Puerto Rico, and that's about 5 days out. Once we get beyond that, we start to get a little bit, the spaghetti plots start to widen out. They start to spread out a little bit. So there is still some uncertainty as to exactly how close this gets to the U.S. mainland. And how close it gets to the state of Florida, quite frankly. So once it gets north of Puerto Rico, I would say probably by Monday or Tuesday, we should have a much better idea about in terms of how far away from the U.S. this storm will eventually get. So just stay tuned for that. Now here's a look at two of our forecast models. We actually have been showing these on air. We showed this on air yesterday. Just two of the models that we do look at are the European model, as it's represented in red here, and then there's the GFS, the American model, that's in green. So you'll notice the models are in pretty good agreement here as we start to progress this system off to the west. Even as we get towards Puerto Rico, there's not too much of a change, but once we get past Hispaniola, look at how much these models diverge, okay? One model brings it through into the Bahamas. The other model takes it up the East Coast. So, and we have a ton of other computer models that are somewhere in between, okay? So they're really, once you get, again, past Puerto Rico, there's just still a lot of concern here. Not to say that one model is right and one model is wrong. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is just to note that there is still a tremendous amount of uncertainty as to exactly where this system, if it impacts, that's the big question, if it's going to actually impact the U.S., and if so, where? There are still way too many question marks at this time to give you with any kind of certainty and tell you where it's headed. And I'll tell you what, anyone who tells you that they know exactly where this thing is going now, they are lying through their teeth. So this is why we're just going to keep watching this over the next couple of days, and it's certainly through most of next week as well. Now, this time frame, these potential positions, this would be by the end of next week and into the following weekend. So that's where we're going to continue to watch, Irma and see exactly where this thing goes. Now, what's steering this? What's actually guiding Irma? Well, here's the setup. We've got the hurricane mark there, but you guys have heard of the Bermuda High. Here's how it's situated. We've got a big ridge set up over the Atlantic here. And what that's doing is the system is basically rounding right around the outside of this ridge. And that's what's pushing this off to the west. That's what typically happens with most tropical systems that come off of Africa. It rounds that ridge. So here's the question marks. The ridge stays intact through Tuesday. So that will keep this on a westerly trajectory. Now the question is, how strong is this ridge next week? Most of the models do indicate, as you see there, that this ridge will actually start to weaken. But the question is, when does that happen? If it happens early, then the storm starts to move north early. If it happens a little bit later and we denote a stronger ridge in place, that would push the storm farther to the west and closer to the U.S. mainland. So that's just sort of the things that we're looking at here in the Forecast Center. And some of the things are just still sort of up in the air. So the bottom line with Irma here, yes, it's a strong hurricane, Category 2 right now, expected to become a Category 3 again. But at this point, I wouldn't get too overly concerned right now. Again, we've got a long time to watch this storm. Once we start getting into early next week and we start to get much more certain about where this thing is going to go, then we can start talking about potential impacts to the U.S. And I do want to stress the word potential because this storm could very well just stay out to sea. This storm could also potentially affect the U.S. That question is up in the air at this point. But just make sure that, just know that we're going to continue to keep you updated on air and online here on our Facebook page in regards to what happens with Irma. So just be wary of that. We're keeping our eyes on all this for you. So in terms of what's happening locally, well, first of all, let me tell you that we're now in September. This is typically when we start getting into the peak of hurricane season. So at this point, you look at climatology, the entire Atlantic is fair game at this point. Storms coming off of Africa. Water temperatures are super warm at this point. So this is really when you start getting to the crux of the season. September 10th, by the way, is the official peak of hurricane season. All right, very quickly, if you're wondering where the rain is here at home, Max Defender 8, just like yesterday, we're noting a lot of rain sitting just offshore, and it's been slowly starting to work its way closer to the coast. So you're getting some showers in Hernando and Citrus County right now, but the heaviest stuff is still just hanging offshore. Now, we think eventually some of this will start working onshore. We'll also get some new storms to develop onshore ahead of this as well, once that west wind starts to develop. So we're going to call for a good 50% chance of rain later on today. So that's a look at what we're going to expect today. The good news is by the time we get into Sunday, Monday, the rain chances start coming down a bit. So a little bit more sunshine, warmer temperatures. I know it's a little bit cloudy out there today. But yeah, so it's very similar to what we've had last couple of days. And again, if you find yourself under any rain, we are likely going to see some very heavy downpours. So that's a quick look at what's happening with that. So I'm looking here. I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions. Jennifer Hawley, isn't the European track usually right or more accurate than the others? Not necessarily so. We've seen instances where maybe the European's a little bit more right, a little bit more correct, or maybe the GFS verifies a little bit better. The only reason why I showed you that is I don't want you to focus on either one of those. I just want you to give you an idea of just how uncertain things are going to get once we start getting into about middle of next week. At least right now, we just can't say for sure at this point, are we going to have an impact on the U.S.? We don't know that for sure. Is this storm going to stay out to sea? We don't know that for sure at this point. So let's see. Someone said, is it possible to come into the Bay Area? Kayla, at this point, in terms of Tampa Bay, most of the models sort of paint the direction where this will be more of an impact to the East Coast. That's where most of the computer models are trending right now. And that tends to be where our agreement is as well, where I doubt really whichever path this thing takes, we likely will not see any kind of direct impact to Tampa Bay at this point. That's our current thinking there. Let's see. Which tracking was more correct with the Harvey, the Euro or the American? Actually, you know, they both actually started to come to fruition. Really, they both of them kind of weren't handling Harvey very well as it came off the Yucatan. But once it started to develop in the Yucatan, both of them started to slide this thing into Texas. So in that case, both the models actually verified. Let's see, what's the possibility of it hitting the Carolinas? Well, if you've got any friends or family in the Carolinas, really the entire eastern seaboard is going to be watching this at this point. Again, I really wouldn't lose any sleep over this. Certainly not this weekend. It's the Labor Day weekend. It's a holiday weekend. Please enjoy yourself. Of course, enjoy yourself safely. But then once you start getting into early next week, once we get to about Tuesday, Wednesday, that's when we'll start to pay a little bit more attention. But yeah, the entire eastern seaboard needs to watch for this storm. And just to give an idea about where it's going to head, and we should have a better idea by about Tuesday of next week here. East Coast, did I mean NYC? I mean the entire eastern seaboard. New York all the way down through the Carolinas. And yes, the east coast of Florida needs to watch this as well. Again, I know it's a lot. I know if we're talking about a large swath of real estate here, but that's just where we are at this point. We just, again, are kind of up in the air in terms of exactly where this thing's going to go. And the big if is if it's going to impact the U.S. This could very well be a fish storm. This could very well turn right out to sea. There are just a lot of different factors that are still not quite clear, so we can't give you a certainty as to exactly where this thing is going to go at this point. So, very quickly, let's see, going to be north of Puerto Rico. Yeah, Michelle, it's going to be north of Puerto Rico by about Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And so that's a little bit of what's happening here with Irma. If you're just hopping on with us, I know we have over 1,000 viewers. Let me just show again where this thing is relative to the U.S. It's way out there, okay? I'll just show you this and just show you the National Hurricane Center forecast track. It's starting to look a little bit better. There's the eye. It's a relatively small hurricane here. Winds are now 110, so it is still a strong Category 2 hurricane, expected to regain some strength, and it could become a Category 3 hurricane tomorrow. And there's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. It's going to move west-southwest. It's actually a dip a little bit farther south with a strengthening high to the north. And then eventually it starts to round around the outer edge of that high, so we'll start to eventually turn more west-northwesterly. Most of the forecast models keep this north of the Lesser Antilles, north of Puerto Rico, and north of Hispaniola. But again, once we get beyond this point, that's when things become uncertain. That's when some models keep it out to sea, some bring it closer to the coast. That is a little bit up in the air at this point. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for joining us for this Facebook Live session on our WFLA Facebook page. Just keep in mind you can give us all a follow, the entire Storm Team, and also make sure you like our Storm Team 8 weather page as well. We constantly are putting updates on there. We'll be watching the radar this afternoon. We'll be watching Max Defender 8 and watching for any new updates from the Hurricane Center. The next full update on Irma comes down at 5 p.m. this afternoon. And so we'll just keep our eyes on things for you, and we'll stay busy here in the Forecast Center. From all of us, enjoy your weekend, stay safe, have fun. We'll talk to you soon.